know we're pushing on for time and all that, but you don't want to miss this next speaker. You don't even know who it is.
No, you go ahead.
Well, I tell you this, a few months ago, I was hosting something similar to this, although not with as many wonderful students, in the Borgosh Energy Theatre. There were loads of speakers, including Brezzy, who was great, as usual, but there was one man who I found absolutely extraordinary and truly impressive. And he is here today. He's a young global leader, as chosen by the World Economic Forum. His story just shows an incredible capacity for triumph over adversity. He's just so inspiring. I take a little bit of his story with me every day if I can. He is the co-founder of Run in the Dark, which ran in over 40 cities all across the world this year. Mark Pollock is his name, a truly exceptional man. He's going to be here to speak to you, but first, take a look at this video.
When I was young, I wanted to compete. When I went blind, I wanted to go further. When I broke my back, I just wanted to walk again. And I will.
Welcome. Where would you like to sit, Simone? There? Sit here. Okay, Mark, would you like to sit in the centre? Yeah. So, ladies and gentlemen, can we please welcome Mark Pollock and Simone George?
Okay.
So, are you thirsty, by the way?
No.
Well, I'm a bit thirsty. I wonder if there's any chance we could get a small bit of water. Actually, could we get a small bit of water from a guy called Conor Gazan? And Conor knows that we're all trending on Twitter today, but he's got one special request. Thanks, Conor. And Conor's special request is that his tattoo also trends. Will you show everybody your tattoo, Conor? Do you see that? That's a real live, have you got it on the screen? A real live cycle against suicide tattoo. Can we get a tattoo trending? Is that possible? Conor, thanks for the water. Appreciate it. Thanks, man. So, Simone, can I start with you?
Yes.
You're not even in the video.
No.
I'm fascinated by the story, and a bit like Sonia earlier, I'm really keen that for the 4,000 students today, we gain an insight maybe that's not normally provided. You're driven, you're influenced by a sense of fairness. Could you just maybe explain a little bit, where does that driver for fairness come from?
I suppose I've thought a lot about this in the last couple of years and have had to think a lot about who I am in the last couple of years, since I'm, as Jim said, I'm not in the video, and so most people don't know who I am. I'm Mark's fiance, and Mark broke his back 4 weeks before we were due to be married, and going through that with him and what that meant for me, I've thought about who I am and my life to some extent, and I think that that sense of fairness comes from my mother's family. My grandmother was 104 yesterday, and she was born in yeah, she's I'll tell her she got a round of applause from all you lovely people. She was born in the middle of the Sahara Desert in a place called Bilma, which is part of the Sahara that's called the Rien, the nothing of nothing, because really it's a bad place to be born in. Her mother was 14 years of age when she had her and didn't choose to have her. She was taken as a child bride because of the war that was happening there by a French member of the army. So my grandmother's start in life was probably, although this is something my family don't really talk about as a product of rape of a very young girl. She was then taken from her parents when she was 12 and educated as French Catholic in the Ivory Coast. And she made her way from that start in life to go on and do incredible things, to teach herself lots of languages, to insist on having an education when she was 16 rather than getting married, to having my mum and her sisters and all the grandchildren, great-grandchildren, all of whom have been educated and been given this huge privilege in life, I feel. And what I want to do with that is to redress some balances, if I can, with what I have from that.
And it's such an incredible story, right? You know, to have this lady living in Ireland today who at 13 was a child bride and at 16 had to learn to be a midwife. So this drive for fairness has followed you, if you like. Is what happened to Mark and to you, is that fair?
Oh, no, it's desperately, desperately unfair. It felt unfair, but of course, I know that there isn't really any such thing as luck or unluckiness or really of fairness when it comes to stuff that you can't control. So it is very unfair that Mark, who went blind at 22 and did so much to overcome that and to prove to himself that someone with a disability like that could do everything that everybody else can do, including crazy things like 6 marathons in 7 days. And so it was difficult at first to get my head around that. I think I felt we had some sort of insurance in life that, bad things shouldn't happen to good people, but 2 bad things should definitely not happen to good people. But of course, we now meet people who tell us about the 2 bad things or the 3 bad things they've had in their lives. It's life.
It's life. And again, part of the theme for today has been that the reality of life is sometimes it is shitty, and it's building that resilience is what we need to do to cope. So Mark turned this incident that had happened, the blindness, into an incredible gift, if you like, for motivational speaking, for adventuring, taking the deeds he'd done in sport and bringing them on a much bigger footing, going to South Pole, etc., etc. But after the accident, which left him paralyzed, you, Simone, you worked out what his next challenge would be long before he did. Could you just explain a little bit about that? Not that we're saying you're slow on the uptake, Mark, or anything, just, Simone got there before you.
Well, first of all, Mark was incredibly sick. In fairness to him, for the first 8 months, the longest he was better at any stretch was sort of 4 days at a time. So as well as being paralyzed, he had a head injury and had lots of infections. So really, on the mental health front, he was just trying to get through each day. And while I was sitting beside his bed in intensive care, I started to do what I've loved since I was in school, which is research and academia and reading all the medical journal articles I could find. And I saw that while there was no cure for paralysis, that it required a motivation that Christopher Reeve, the actor who played Superman, had given when he broke his neck, and that had gone. And I knew the man Mark had been before he broke his back, and his ability to move people and to speak to people and to be really open and vulnerable and and publicly talk about what pushed him on to do great stuff, but also what challenged him, and that he could play this role. And I certainly hoped that for him, because that was the man that I'd fallen in love with. So I was then very careful to not force that on him. I felt it had to be his choice, because he must live his life and I must live mine, and those choices had to be his. But I could see that if he managed to get out of that hospital bed, which he eventually did 18 months later, that he I hoped that that's what he would do.
Okay. And Mark, for you, while Simone could kind of see this, your drive was to go back adventuring. And there was one particular incident when you went on a training camp to Norway, and two things happened. The race that you were hoping to compete in got cancelled, but worse than that, what had driven you to compete up to that point was to compete on an equal footing. I mean, you've beaten Royal Marines, you've done all of these things on an absolute equal footing. It was never that the disability was any part of it. It was going to be done on an equal footing. But in Norway, there was this realization for you that you couldn't compete on an equal footing. And that failure somehow had to be dealt with. But you deal with failure and success maybe differently than most. Could you talk a little bit about how you felt leaving Norway, and maybe did that help you understand what your next challenge was going to be?
Yeah, well, I suppose in the video I said when I was young I wanted to compete, and I did. My sport was rowing. After I went blind, I got back into racing. All the adventures I did were races. There were no sort of expeditions, solo expeditions. I was out racing, and that kind of defined me. So after the paralysis, I wanted to get back racing, and we entered a South Pole style expedition race in Siberia. And as you say, we were on our final training camp in Norway with 4 weeks to go. We'd got the sponsorship. I'd got this hand bike from Alaska, 3-wheeler, and I had a team. Me and 3 other guys were going to go and do this race. And in Norway, it became very clear. I was on the handbike, they were on skis, I was holding them back. And what drove me to do the adventures, to race, to compete, to be my version of normal, just was gone. I was a handbrake, and I didn't want to be in the cold as a handbrake, as a novelty. And I failed. I failed. We would have failed in Siberia. I failed in the terms that I had defined to be a racer. But it didn't matter, because if you do really great things and you're successful, it doesn't mean you're a fantastic person. And if you fail in the pursuit of trying, it doesn't make you a really bad person. So, I looked at that situation and said, right, we failed, that's gone. And then I started listening to Simone, and we got into the pursuit and search for a cure for paralysis. And that is now my new expedition.
And Simone, just to go back to that really, and again, Simone, Mark and I, we met again yesterday, and we kind of said that today we're not going to keep it all heavy, because there is fun in this, and there's humor in this, and there's you guys arguing on camera, which is funny for the rest of us. But go back, if we could, Simone, to that 24-hour period immediately after the accident happened. Mark's in Henley, you're in Ireland, and you're trying desperately to get over, to be with him, by him, beside him, of comfort to him. And you made a phone call. Who did you call?
Well, actually, I was thinking about this overnight. I was staying with my sisters, and I'd been swimming in Killiney the night before and had gone out for a couple of drinks and hadn't had a shower. So when the worst day of your life happens, you will have seaweed in your hair and last night's makeup on and, sand in your clothes. So I arrived at Reading Hospital, where Mark was in intensive care, and it was all quite frightening at the time, really quite frightening. He was in a room with people who were dying, and he had a big cut on the back of his head, and a doctor and a nurse came out. I got there before Mark's parents and said, we need to talk to you. And they gestured towards this little room that you always see on those shows like Casualty, and my brain went, oh, don't go into that little room, they're going to give you bad news. So I kept trying to dodge going in, and they kept saying, we really need to tell you how Mark is. You need to come into this room so we can talk to you. And I kept saying, shouldn't we wait till his parents get here? And shouldn't we wait till my parents get here so they can hear as well? And they said, no, you have to come in. Mark needs you to know how he is. And at that moment, although I was in my mid-30s, I think I really became an adult when I realized that I was in charge of what was going on. And after I came out, my sisters said, Dad's on the phone. And again, I thought, brilliant, my dad's run. He'll fix it, He'll know what to do. He'll know what to say. He'll pick me up and put a plaster on my knee and give me a kiss. And my dad got on the phone and said, I'm so sorry, my love. And that was all he could say. He has since, of course, like everybody else, given us this amazing support and have been beside or behind or holding us up. And I'd say that was an equally sad conversation for him, because dads would love nothing more than to say, don't worry, I'll come and fix it all for you,
So that moment.
My banning of crying isn't working very well.
We spoke yesterday, and I mentioned in the conversation that there was a part of our conversation where you had really sad eyes, and Mark said, I wish I could see your sad eyes, my love. And you heard it, Mark. You didn't have to see it.
That was a terrible trick, because I normally manage to dodge it, because Mark doesn't know I look sad, doesn't comfort me, and then I'm fine.
Yeah.
And I'm able to be very together, but I need to be less ruthless with myself about crying and feeling sad. Yeah.
Well, maybe just to take that for a second, because you said something yesterday which I was fascinated by. And Mark, she told me, and you were there, you heard it, that after your accident, you cried a lot, like a big baby, like big tears, and you cried a lot. And a lot of your friends who were there at the time would have been fellow oarsmen, big strapping lads. In these seats today we had Alan Quinlan and Brezzy and Seamus Hennessy, big guys. And Simone said she'd often come into the room and it'd be grown men crying. But what she said, Simone, is that crying, you think, saved him. What did you mean by that?
I think it saved Mark from becoming depressed. I think he has an ability that I don't have, maybe a learned ability to be sad when he's sad and to be happy when he's happy. And he had broken his back and found himself blind and paralyzed, and that's really bloody sad. And cried and gave everybody else the permission to grieve in the moment, and did. And now we know that when he got physically better and got his head around, started to set goals. I saw the Mount Anvil project, one of the recommendations was to set goals, and that's very much how Mark worked. He moved into that next phase. There's still tears every now and then, because there are days when being blind and paralyzed is particularly difficult. But I think it's a healthy thing, and it's a thing I didn't do that easily. Maybe I noticed that. I mean, you probably cried every day for a while.
I would have, yeah.
And because he couldn't move, he was lying like this. He'd have to pick up the sheet and throw it over his face, just to have some privacy. Hospital isn't a very private place, but yeah, he cried. He also laughed a lot, and actually was on a lot of. This is not a recommendation to ever take or do drugs, but was on a lot of very hardcore drugs and was hallucinating. And so it was like living with a cartoon. He would tell we'd say to him, "What do you see now?" Being blind, could see. And they were wonderful things. One day I was wearing half a lemon on my head as a hat. And when my sister came in, she was wearing half a lime. And then the pain team came in to make sure that the morphine wasn't too high, and they said, "Are you having any hallucinations?" And Mark said, "No." And I said, "Mark, should you tell them about my hat?" And he laughed, like, "Oh, Simone." And he said, "Well, the thing is, Simone's wearing a half a lemon as a hat, and her sister Lisa's wearing half an orange. But what'll be interesting is when her older sister comes in, because I think that'll be a lime."
So Mark, in circumstances like this, and timing is, life is funny, right? Today, just over there, Nikki and Shauna Clear are here, and I met Nikki and Shauna on Secret Millionaire in September 2012, and Nikki had also an accident with an acquired brain injury, and when I met Nikki and Shauna, they were a couple, and it was a very trying period, but they managed, they survived, and they're here today with their baby Dylan, and it's a wonderful story. Mark, for you, you speak very openly about your love for Simone and her love for you. Where and why do you think your relationship has blossomed, has survived and blossomed, where many other relationships have broken down when faced with this kind of adversity?
Never been asked that one, Jim. But I think, if I strip it all back, we actually met because I'd done a talk in Miami, and I went to salsa dancing clubs in Miami, and I wanted, I was with a mate of mine called Nick Wolf, and he was telling me about all the girls in these salsa dancing clubs, and when I came back to Dublin, I wanted to learn how to salsa dance, to go back to Miami to dance with one of these girls, you see. And Simone, who's a lawyer, had lived in Spain and was salsa dancing. She was salsa dancing in Dublin. I asked her to teach me, and over the following weeks and months, we spent more and more time together and started going out with each other, and we just enjoyed spending time with each other. And I think, regardless of the accident, the incidents, the story, I think we fundamentally like each other, and I think that's important.
Yeah.
And I think it's also important to say that often when these things happen, the relationship does break down, and the question is that because of the pressure of the accident, the time in the hospital? Did they just not like each other anyway? I would hate for Simone to be staying with me because of a sense of duty, and I think we had to work hard over time, changing our relationship from what it was potentially could have come Simone caring for me and being a carer, and going back to being a relationship. And now we still fundamentally like each other. We love each other, and relationships remain hard whether you're paralyzed or whether you're not. So we've got to keep working at it. We've got to keep reminding ourselves that we like each other, and we've got to keep remembering that we're in a relationship, that it's not all about the paralysis. It's an equal partnership.
Super, thank you. I could, I'm fascinated by both of you, and I could talk to you all day. Unfortunately, I'm been told we have to wrap up, but can I ask one final question? So I spoke today in this room about trust, and the trust to believe that we can break the cycle of suicide on the island of Ireland, you've taken on a challenge, this next adventure, and that's to find a cure for paralysis. So just look at the data for a second, right? This is a 100% failure rate so far, and you're taking on this challenge. Where does both of you, where does your trust come from, that you trust that this is a fight worth fighting?
Well, I think from my point of view, I was an adventurer, I was a racer at the South Pole, but I read a lot of books and was inspired by Shackleton and Scott and Amundsen and Tom Crean and the Irish explorers. 100 years ago, it was impossible to go to the South Pole. There had been a 100% failure rate to get to the South Pole, but it didn't stop those guys trying. And with paralysis, there's a 100% failure rate, but I don't think we should stop trying. We're exploring, we're working with new explorers, scientists who work in neuroscience, robotics, electrical stimulation, pharmacology, physiotherapy, explorers, a new wave of exploration. So the fact there's a 100% failure rate doesn't mean that we should stop trying. And if we fail, as my mum would say, it doesn't make you a bad person. But we're trying to succeed.
Guys, do you think they got a fighting chance? Could I ask you all to give the loudest cheer and ovation for Simone George and Mark Pollock? Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very, very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.